Her ex-husband mocked her as a nobody after remarrying rich. But one unexpected visit changed everything. Naomi sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the untouched cup of tea on the coffee table. The silence in the living room felt heavier than the final words her husband had spoken just minutes earlier. Damien hadn't even raised his voice, he never did, but the coldness in his tone, the detached certainty in his words, left a sting far deeper than any shout. "It's time we stopped pretending, Naomi," he had said. "I need someone who matches my pace." And just like that, after 6 years of marriage, everything she thought was stable shattered quietly. There was no dramatic fight, no betrayal exposed, just a quiet, calculated severing of ties. She didn't cry right away. She sat frozen, as if her mind refused to process the reality of the moment. She had given so much of herself to the relationship, supported him through law school, waited tables at night while managing their home by day. The irony that now, when he was finally thriving in his career, he decided she no longer belonged in his world, wasn't lost on her. He had already packed some of his belongings, she realized as she walked into their shared bedroom, half the closet was empty. His side of the dresser looked untouched. It was as if he had planned everything meticulously before even confronting her. Days later, Naomi stood at the family gathering Damien had insisted they still attend, for appearances, he had claimed. She was met with stiff smiles and whispered comments that barely hid their blame. Damien's mother took her aside at one point, squeezing Naomi's hands with a pitying grip. "We warned him," she said with a half-smile, "not to settle down with someone so ordinary. You're kind, Naomi, but he needs a partner who can keep up." The words were sugar-coated, but Naomi felt the sting in every syllable. Her presence there had not been to maintain appearances, it was to witness her own dismissal from a world she no longer fit into. The evening ended with Damien thanking everyone for their support as he announced, subtly but proudly, that he had met someone who aligned better with his values. The message was clear. Naomi watched as relatives she had once cooked for and laughed with turned toward the new woman in his life with interest. No one asked Naomi how she was holding up, not even once. She left early, stepping into the cold evening air alone, wrapping her coat tighter around herself. She didn't cry until she was back in her apartment, staring at the dark ceiling above her bed, wondering when exactly she became someone easy to leave. Weeks turned into months, and Naomi found herself sitting across from a kindly woman at a small flower shop named Hazel's Blooms. "It's part-time," the woman had explained, "mostly arrangements and customer service. It doesn't pay much, but the atmosphere is peaceful." Naomi nodded gratefully. After leaving her office assistant job due to the emotional weight of the divorce, she needed something to ground her. The scent of lilies and roses, the texture of ribbon and paper, gave her a strange sense of comfort she hadn't expected. There was something healing in working with beauty. She learned to handle blooms with gentle precision, to listen to customers' stories behind each bouquet request. Birthdays, apologies, losses, love, every order held a meaning. Naomi began to feel herself breathing more deeply, moving with more purpose, even if she still carried a heavy sadness beneath it all. The flower shop didn't ask her for more than she could give. Hazel, the owner, was patient and kind, never asking personal questions, only gently encouraging Naomi to take pride in her small but meaningful tasks. It wasn't the life she thought she'd have at 34, but it was a beginning, one petal at a time. News traveled fast in the small circle of their old neighborhood. Naomi didn't need to search for updates on Damien, friends and former in-laws made sure she knew. Damien had remarried. The bride was Serena Hollings, heiress to a well-known cosmetics empire and a fixture in local society pages. Naomi stumbled upon the headline by accident: "Power couple Damien and Serena make debut at City Gala." The accompanying photo showed Damien, sharply dressed and beaming, his hand resting confidently on Serena's waist. Naomi stared at the photo for a long time, not out of longing, but disbelief at how quickly she had been replaced. The comments on social media were worse. Acquaintances remarked on how Damien had leveled up, noting Serena's wealth, her poise, her connections. Naomi's name never appeared, not even in the polite sense of his former wife. It was as if her years with him had been erased. That night, Naomi stood in her small kitchen, slowly washing dishes, and allowed herself one moment of raw pain. Not because she still wanted Damien, but because it was cruel how easily the world dismissed someone simply because they didn't sparkle. She was a florist now. A nobody. And the world made sure she remembered it. It was a rainy Wednesday when the bell above the shop door chimed and Naomi looked up from an arrangement of white orchids. Standing at the entrance, slightly damp from the weather, was Damien, and beside him, Serena, dressed in an elegant beige coat that looked like it cost more than Naomi's monthly rent. Serena's eyes scanned the shop quickly, her nose wrinkling slightly as if the floral scent was overpowering. "Charming little place," she said dryly. Naomi's heart pounded, but she held her posture steady. Damien met her eyes briefly, then looked away as if ashamed. "Oh," Serena said after a pause, recognition dawning. "You're the ex, right?" Before Naomi could respond, Serena laughed and added, "Even your perfume smells nostalgic. Like something from a high school locker." Damien didn't stop her. Naomi didn't flinch. She simply offered a quiet smile and asked, "Can I help you with anything?" Serena leaned into Damien and whispered something that made him chuckle under his breath. Naomi's hands stayed steady as she wrapped a bouquet. The humiliation was sharp, but she swallowed it whole. Not today, she thought. Not here. This was her space now. No matter what they thought, she wasn't that broken girl anymore. The door closed behind Damien and Serena, but their words lingered like a stale scent Naomi couldn't wash away. Still, she returned to her work, threading ribbons through bouquet stems with steady hands. It wasn't just about flowers anymore. Every arrangement was her quiet defiance, a declaration that she still had worth. The shop had become her sanctuary, and even humiliation couldn't break that rhythm. Naomi began arriving early, using the quiet mornings to reorganize the back room and take notes on seasonal blooms. Hazel noticed the change and gently encouraged her curiosity. "You've got a good eye for combinations," she said one day. Naomi, for the first time in months, smiled without effort. The petals she once handled like fragile glass now felt like possibilities in her fingers. There was strength in their softness. Naomi's birthday fell on a Sunday that year, and the city was soaked in gray rain. She hadn't expected anyone to remember, and she hadn't told anyone either. She opened the shop early, as usual, and began arranging marigolds and eucalyptus for a sympathy order. At noon, a regular customer, Mrs. Ellery, came in with a small potted violet. "For you, dear," she said warmly. "People like you shouldn't be forgotten." Naomi was stunned. The old woman's gesture cracked something soft and unguarded inside her. Along with the flower, Mrs. Ellery handed her a handwritten note. It wasn't anything extraordinary, just a reminder that resilience, like roots, grows unseen but strong. Naomi read it 3 times. That night, sitting by her window with the violet in her lap, she cried, not from sadness, but from the unfamiliar comfort of being seen. Inspired by the kindness she'd received in her growing knowledge, Naomi started sketching ideas in a worn notebook she found in her closet. It began as doodles, interior layouts, logo ideas, flower concepts paired with scents and moods. What if flowers weren't just seen but experienced, she scribbled. A boutique that blended floristry with sensory design began to take shape on the page. Hazel saw her notebook one evening after closing. Instead of dismissing it, she looked through the pages with genuine interest. "This is special," she said. "More than just flowers. You're creating something people will feel." Naomi's heart leapt. For the first time in years, her dreams weren't just survival, they were blooming into something of her own. She didn't know how she'd make it real, but the seed had been planted. Weeks later, while delivering an arrangement to a corporate office, Naomi struck up a conversation with an elderly man in the lobby. He asked about the unusual scent blend in the bouquet, intrigued by the calming notes she had layered into the petals. His name was Mr. Whitaker, and he said little about himself, only that he admired thoughtful design. She explained her boutique concept with shy passion. To her surprise, he listened with genuine interest. A week later, he returned to the shop with a business card and a proposal. He had been an investor in creative startups for decades and wanted to help her bring her vision to life. "But only if you remain true to this," he said, pointing to her notebook. Naomi's hands trembled as she accepted. She had no experience with business, but this was her chance to rewrite her story. Within 3 months, Naomi found herself standing inside the shell of what would become the Scented Garden. A sunlit space on a quiet downtown street, with high ceilings and rustic beams, it felt like it had been waiting for her. Mr. Whitaker guided her through the legal steps, but the design, the soul of the place, was entirely hers. She chose every bloom, every fragrance, every shade of paint. Opening day was quiet, but steady. People stepped in expecting a flower shop and left wide-eyed, talking about the immersive experience. Naomi had created curated corners, lavender for calm, citrus for clarity, rose for remembrance. It wasn't just about selling flowers, it was about evoking emotion. As she stood behind the counter that evening, surrounded by a soft floral breeze, she felt it for the first time, pride, not survival. Word about the Scented Garden spread quietly, almost like a secret whispered between friends. Customers came in curious and left with smiles, often returning with others in tow. Naomi made it a point to learn their names, remember their preferences, and offer comfort when needed. Her boutique became more than a shop, it became a refuge. A place where even the weary could breathe easier. Naomi began hiring staff, not based on experience, but on sincerity. A young woman who had aged out of foster care, a quiet man recovering from burnout, a retired teacher looking for purpose, they became her team. She trained them with patience and treated them like family. Their loyalty showed in the warmth that filled the store, and Naomi's heart expanded with every passing day. It was a garden not just of flowers, but of healing. One morning, Naomi overheard 2 customers near the hydrangeas whispering, "Isn't that the ex-wife of Damian Layton? You know, the one who married into the Hollings fortune?" Naomi pretended not to hear, continuing her arrangement. "I heard she owns this place now," the other replied. Funny how life turns. Naomi had learned to let gossip pass through her like wind through trees, but this time, it lingered. Later that week, one of her employees, Maribel, mentioned that Serena Hollings had reposted a photo of the Scented Gardens bouquet on her luxury lifestyle blog, calling it surprisingly tasteful. Naomi laughed softly. It was clearly meant as a backhanded compliment, but the exposure doubled her online orders. The irony wasn't lost on her. Serena had once called her scent cheap. Now, she was unknowingly promoting it. The boutique was buzzing on a Saturday afternoon when Naomi looked up from her workbench and saw them. Damian and Serena walked in, flanked by a personal assistant. Serena wore oversized sunglasses and carried herself with the elegance of practiced wealth. Naomi felt the shift in the air as other customers turned to look. She kept her expression neutral and stepped forward with professional ease. Serena removed her sunglasses slowly, locking eyes with Naomi. "You again," she said with a faint smirk. Damien looked uncomfortable, eyes darting around as if hoping not to be recognized. "We're looking for something unique," Serena added. "For a charity gala." Naomi nodded, guiding them toward the specialty arrangements without comment. Her voice was calm, her movements deliberate. She had nothing to prove, and that silence spoke volumes. As Naomi explained a custom arrangement designed to evoke nostalgia and confidence, Serena interrupted, "Funny. Confidence doesn't strike me as something you ever had." Damien chuckled nervously, but Naomi's face remained composed. "Sometimes it takes losing everything to find your center," she replied, her tone soft but unwavering. Her words hung in the air, drawing quiet attention from nearby customers. Before Serena could fire back, Gregory, the store manager, approached with a cheerful smile. "Naomi, the delivery for Ms. Caldwell is ready. Should I have it sent now?" Serena blinked. "Naomi?" she repeated, confused. "You work here?" Gregory looked puzzled. "She owns this place," he said matter-of-factly. "We all work for her." The silence that followed was delicious. Serena's face froze. Damien's eyes dropped to the floor. Naomi smiled politely and walked away. The assistant fumbled with her tablet while Serena composed herself. "Well," she said tightly, "I suppose even broken clocks are right twice a day." Damien glanced at Naomi and opened his mouth, perhaps to say something, an apology, a defense, but nothing came out. Naomi stood near the orchids, her posture calm and unbothered. She no longer needed their approval, and they knew it. Serena purchased a modest arrangement and left without another word. As the door closed behind them, Naomi turned to Gregory. "Back to work," she said lightly, and he nodded, smiling. That evening, Naomi reflected on the moment, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Once, she would have replayed it endlessly in her mind. But now, it felt like something behind her. Like an old season finally changing. A week after the encounter, Naomi received a call from a local magazine editor who had visited the scented garden anonymously. "We'd love to feature your boutique in our small business spotlight," the editor said. Naomi hesitated but agreed. The feature went live the following month with the headline, "From Divorce to Design, the woman behind the city's most soulful flower shop." The article struck a chord with readers. Messages began flooding in, women thanking her for sharing her story, former clients recalling her quiet grace during their weddings or funerals, strangers saying they now felt less alone. Orders tripled, and foot traffic surged. Naomi stood in the center of the blooming chaos and marveled. She had once been discarded and forgotten. Now, her story was being shared as a symbol of quiet power and reclaimed dignity. While Naomi's star rose, things were beginning to crumble behind Serena's polished exterior. The cosmetics company she had inherited was facing lawsuits over sourcing ethics. Their investors started pulling out. Damien, who had once basked in Serena's wealth and influence, now found himself scrambling to manage damage control. But he lacked the experience and the grace to lead under pressure. Naomi heard about it in whispers. A customer mentioned the story appearing on the business section's front page. Serena's name was followed by words like controversy and decline. Naomi felt a flicker of something. Was it pity? Satisfaction? She didn't let it linger. Their downfall wasn't her victory. Still, a part of her couldn't ignore the symmetry. Just as she found her rise, they began their fall. One morning, as Naomi was trimming lavender stems, she received an unexpected email from Damien. It was brief, almost stiff in its formality. He asked if she'd be willing to meet, a professional proposal, he claimed. Naomi stared at the message, conflicted. Her instinct was to delete it without response. But curiosity, and perhaps closure, persuaded her to reply with a single line, tomorrow. Noon. At the cafe near the old courthouse. Damien arrived late, his suit wrinkled, eyes tired. He danced around the small talk, then finally admitted what he wanted, branding support. Serena's company was desperate to revamp its image and reconnect with customers. Your shop has soul, he said awkwardly. You understand connection. We don't. Naomi listened without expression. Part of her wanted to laugh, another part wanted to walk out. But instead, she said, let me think about it. Naomi spent that night staring at the ceiling, her thoughts tangled. Helping them meant more exposure, potential growth, and saving the jobs of workers in Serena's company who had nothing to do with its mistakes. But it also meant stepping back into a story she had closed. In the morning, she brewed her tea slowly, letting the scent of chamomile and mint settle her. She made a decision, not out of sympathy, but responsibility. She replied to Damien's email with a contract attached. It clearly stated her creative control, her conditions, and her boundaries. No shared credit, no public reconciliation narrative. She would help restore the company's image, but strictly through her work. Damien agreed immediately. The next week, Naomi walked into the boardroom of Serena's company not as someone needing help, but as the help they desperately needed. Naomi's involvement began discreetly. She curated scent-based campaigns, redesigned their floral branding, and created care-centered messaging that rehumanized the brand. The transformation was subtle but powerful. Sales began to recover. Staff morale improved. Even Serena, initially resistant, began to follow Naomi's lead during strategy meetings. She listens to the customers, one manager said. We never did. Damien tried to make conversation after one meeting, complimenting her ideas and bringing up old memories. Naomi responded with polite indifference. She had no desire to revisit their past. This is work, she said calmly. Let's keep it professional. He looked disappointed, perhaps expecting some trace of longing. But Naomi had outgrown that chapter. She wasn't seeking revenge. She was simply writing a better ending. Naomi never stayed longer than necessary at Serena's offices. She worked mostly from her boutique, sending digital mock-ups and strategy briefs. Her terms were clear: she was not part of their board, nor would she attend events or participate in press releases. Damien continued sending friendly messages, testing the waters, but Naomi responded only when needed. She kept the boundary sharp, and he knew better than to cross it. Despite the distance, her influence within the company was undeniable. The new floral line Naomi designed launched with impressive success, earning praise for its sincerity and warmth. Customers who had once turned away began to return. Serena, though prideful, couldn't ignore the results. One afternoon, she sent Naomi a message: I still don't understand how you do it, but thank you. Naomi didn't reply. The work spoke for itself. As Naomi's impact grew, whispers followed. Employees started piecing the story together. Damien's ex-wife was now the woman saving their jobs. Some admired her, others were stunned. A few even apologized to her in quiet emails, remembering past assumptions. One message read, "I judged you based on his version of events. I was wrong." Naomi appreciated the words, though she never responded. At a board meeting, a young marketing assistant accidentally referred to Naomi as the real CEO behind this turnaround. The room went silent. Serena forced a smile, Damien cleared his throat, and the assistant turned red. Naomi kept her expression unreadable, but inside, she felt something shift. Respect. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet and earned. The kind that lasts because it's built on truth. Late one night, Naomi walked through her boutique, now quiet and dimly lit, and memories from her past returned uninvited. She remembered the sting of Serena's laughter, the hollow look in Damien's eyes, the day she walked out of their shared apartment carrying nothing but a duffel bag. She could still feel the cold rain from that birthday when no one called, when she cried into her pillow in silence. But those moments didn't break her, they refined her. Like iron in fire, she had endured the heat and emerged sharper, stronger. Her pain had become the soil from which something better had grown. In a way, she was grateful for it now. It had taught her everything she needed to know about endurance, self-worth, and rebuilding from ruins. She no longer wished to erase the past. She had outlived it. While cleaning out an old box in her apartment, Naomi stumbled across a folded envelope addressed to herself. She recognized her own handwriting, wobbly, uncertain, written during the early days of her divorce. Inside was a letter she had written in despair, filled with doubts, self-blame, and questions like "What did I do wrong?" and "Will I ever feel whole again?" Reading it brought a lump to her throat. But instead of tears, Naomi felt a deep, quiet pride. She sat down at her desk and wrote a reply to that letter. She told her past self about the flower shop, the boutique, the people she had helped. She wrote, "You didn't lose. You evolved." She folded the new letter and tucked it beside the old one in a small wooden box, sealing it with a lavender ribbon. Some stories, she realized, deserved to be answered. Months later, Serena's company hosted a formal event to celebrate the brand's recovery. Naomi was invited, not as a guest, but as the guest of honor. She almost declined but reconsidered. She didn't go for the recognition. She went for herself. She walked into the ballroom wearing a sleek black dress, understated but elegant. Heads turned. Damien stood near the entrance, his expression unreadable. When Serena took the stage and introduced Naomi, there was genuine applause. "This woman brought more than flowers," Serena said. "She brought perspective, honesty, and humility. Things we had forgotten." Naomi spoke briefly, thanking her team and customers. She never mentioned the past, never pointed fingers. But her presence said everything. She was no longer the woman who had been humiliated. She was the woman they now looked up to. The morning after the gala, Naomi opened her inbox to a wave of messages. Photos of her standing beside Damien had been shared by industry blogs, and speculation spread quickly. "Are they reconnecting?" one headline asked. Another read, "From ex to executive?" Naomi closed the browser and exhaled. She knew how people loved stories of redemption through romance. But her story had nothing to do with love rekindled. She called a journalist she trusted and gave a quiet, firm interview. "I didn't rise by going back," she said. "I rose by moving forward." The article was released the next day and ended the speculation swiftly. Naomi's words reminded everyone that closure doesn't always mean reconciliation, and that strength sometimes looks like choosing peace over fantasy. She didn't need the world to misunderstand her growth. While restocking candles at the scented garden, Naomi noticed Julian again. He was a perfumer she'd partnered with months ago, quiet and thoughtful, with a deep passion for blending scent and emotion. They had shared late emails about fragrance notes and the meaning of memory, but recently, their conversations lingered longer. He stayed after meetings, helped her rearrange displays, and once brought her tea on a cold morning. Julian never asked about her past. He only ever asked how she felt about today. Naomi began to look forward to his visits, his calming presence, the way he saw beauty in quiet things. One evening, while closing the shop together, he said gently, "You remind me of something rare, something that doesn't bloom to impress, but because it's ready." Naomi didn't reply, she simply smiled, her heart stirring for the first time in years. A letter arrived one afternoon, addressed in handwriting Naomi recognized immediately. It was from Damien. Inside, a single page carried his apology, not the casual, evasive kind he used to offer, but a real one. He wrote about how he'd failed her, how he hadn't understood her value, and how watching her rise had taught him more than he cared to admit. He didn't ask for anything. He only asked to be forgiven. Naomi folded the letter and placed it in the box beside her old one. Forgiveness didn't require a grand gesture. She had already let go of the resentment long ago. When she passed Damien on the street weeks later, they exchanged a nod. Nothing more. And it was enough. He had finally said the words, and she had finally stopped needing to hear them. With her boutique thriving, Naomi expanded. A second location opened in a nearby city, brighter, bigger, but with the same soul. She trained new staff, carried the same values, and ensured every arrangement still felt like a story. Customers began requesting lectures, workshops, even mentoring. Naomi, once unseen, was now a guide to others looking for healing through creation. Her work had become a movement. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, she stood beside Julian, her team behind her. Cameras flashed, and for a moment, she closed her eyes, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender and white tea. This wasn't the life she once imagined, but it was fuller, richer, and real. Everything she had lost had made space for something greater. Not a perfect life, but one rooted in authenticity. Back home, Naomi opened the wooden box once more. She reread the first letter, the voice of a woman once trembling, broken, and alone. Then the second, the voice of a woman steady and grounded. Now, she added a third. She wrote, "You survived the storm. You grew in the dark. And now you bloom where no one expected." She sealed the envelope, tied all three with a satin ribbon, and placed them gently inside. That night, Naomi sat by the window of her apartment, now filled with plants and light. Julian brewed tea in the kitchen. The city outside buzzed, but inside, everything was calm. She had no need to prove anything, no desire to look back. She had grown from the very soil meant to bury her. And now, she bloomed. Quietly. Completely. And on her own terms.